Ryan and I have been together since 2006. Started dating out of high school. I think when we first met, you were building.
I was currently building I was starting to build my F-150 at the time.
Well, before that, when I first met you, you were building that
So I was building
single-seater buggy.
I had a single-seat buggy that had a two-stroke 100 motor in it. It was more of I guess you could say it was like a go-kart / buggy. The chassis looked like a buggy, but the rear end was more like a go-kart, where it had a swing axle with a chain driven, and it had a shifter from it was a 100, I think like a 70s 100 Yamaha had that type of motor in it. And my cousin and I back in the day, we started building this stuff, going to Akatia. We rode dirt bikes for a long time. I got my first welder when I was 13. I think I was 12 or 13. My mom and my dad got me my first welder. I did a lot of woodwork and stuff like that, but I always had the desire to, make metal stick to each other. So my mom got me a welder, and my dad. I started building stuff slowly, learning suspension, design, that type of stuff. And, from there, it just one thing led to another. And, when I met Luana, I was building that little buggy. I had taken it out to the desert a bunch of times, and it was great. We used to go to Akatia all the time with it. I actually rolled it off of like a 4-foot cliff and bent the front suspension all up, because the front suspension was just, I think it was 1-inch 120 wall tubing, so it was all mild steel, HERW, no DOM. I didn't even know what DOM was back then. I always heard about chromoly.
With the Harbor Freight Kinker?
So that was all built with the Harbor Freight Kinker. No sand in the tubes. I got really good with bending with it, to where I could bend and not kink the tube, and just do long radius bends on stuff. And there were certain ways you could use it to where you could actually bend stuff and not destroy the tubing.
So it wasn't always fancy tube bender, tube notcher, fancy welder.
So going back to the F-150, after I met Luana, I've always had a desire to have long travel on a truck, a daily drive pre-runner, and I really couldn't afford it back in the day. So I remember I always wanted a TIG welder. Well, my mom and my stepdad, they actually bought me it was a Miller Gold Star 300, and it was like the old Tombstone welders. I mean, the thing was probably 5 feet tall by 3 feet wide by 2 feet depth. It was massive. And I remember we only had a 100-amp breaker on my mom's house, and it would throw the house breaker all the time, because the thing was meant to run on like 60 amps. So my first set of lower arms that I built for my F-150 were actually, they were built with a 4.5-inch angle grinder with a cutoff wheel, and it was all laid out by hand, and everything was cut by hand, bent by hand in a vise, and I actually still have those lowers today. They're sitting on the wall in the shop.
Well, we always wanted to keep them so that we would have something to show the kids. Hey, when I was 19 years old, I was able to build this. You're capable of building.
Yeah, I think that was like 17 or 18.
Yeah, you were.
So it doesn't take all the fancy tools to build everything. It just takes motivation and time. I think I had 80 hours into those lower arms, I think is what I remember. And it was, we've come so far since then. It's crazy to think of where we were at back then. I mean, we were working on a wooden bench with a 4.5-inch angle grinder, never had a plasma. Everything back then was welded together with a Lincoln, I think it was a 110 Lincoln welder from Home Depot. And I mean, everything held up, never had a weld break. I just used to run on the highest setting you could and just go to town. So just remember, it doesn't take all the fancy tools to build it. It just takes motivation and time.
And you don't even have to be a professional or have a background in it, because Ryan never had a background in this. You taught yourself everything you know, reading on forums, reading books, asking people for advice, or information or guidance?
Yeah, I taught myself to weld. I never worked at a shop. Never went to any welding classes, nothing like that. Most of the stuff I've learned either from talking to people or just trial and error. So, you know, I mean, I think we built my truck back in 2007 was when we originally built the front end on my truck. It had a tube upper arm with a horizontal uniball in the upper. It pulled about 14 and a half, 15 inches of travel in the front. Funny story, when we mounted the coilovers, I talked to someone on a forum and I asked them, hey, how do you find out how to mount the coilover on the suspension at full bump? Well, he told me 90 degrees, but he didn't tell me 90 degrees to the lower arm or the plane between the lower uniball and the frame pivot for the lower arm. So I mounted them 90 degrees. So as it would bump out, it got really soft. So it was actually digressive versus, progressive. But it was funny. I mean, the truck worked decent. It wasn't amazing, but for
what we knew at the time.
Yeah, for being an 18-year-old kid out of high school, it was amazing to us at the time. We used to go up hill runs. We have some fire roads and stuff like that, and there were jumps and stuff on them, so it was fun. But we've come a long way from there, and
we've learned a lot.
Now we're machining parts, we're designing stuff in SolidWorks, and
building your own hubs.
Yeah, we're building our own hubs. We're starting to build our own sway bar arms.
And it's not so much that we don't want to buy someone else's product. It's more of, if we're capable of doing it ourselves, we try to do as much ourselves as we can. More of like a challenge to ourselves and be able to prove to ourselves that we're capable of doing this and not just buying an off-the-shelf part.
Yeah, I'm a person that if I can do it in-house, I'll do anything in-house that I can. It challenges me. I love making stuff from scratch. So, currently we have 3 center mounts going, as well as another truck that we took and swapped a whole cab onto it. Behind us right now is, it actually came to us as we built an Explorer for Trent, and it's a TTB Explorer, full back half. It's back half from about the driver's seat, right behind the driver's and passenger seat back, and full TTBs, full cage, full engine cage, coilover bypass all 4 corners, sway bar in the rear. So we built that, and he's had that for a few years. Well, a guy named Nick contacted me and wanted us to build almost the exact same thing. Well, one thing led to another. He started gathering parts for it, and some parts would work, some parts wouldn't. And then we started talking about, what were his, intentions for the truck in the end. Because a lot of people will do what I did with the F-150. They'll build the front end, they'll build the back end, they'll cage it, and then it ends up being, you rebuild everything 3 or 4 times, and it just, it spirals out of control. You spend money twice, and
because I guess what you mean is you get the front end done, works well. You get the rear end done, also works well, but then you start outgrowing the truck. You want to go faster. TTBs are no longer fast enough for what the truck is becoming when you put a bigger motor and it has more horsepower and you're putting bigger shocks, so you're starting to be limited by the suspension.
And then to rebuild, to take a nice truck that already works real good and rebuild it's a waste. You're more beneficial to start over. And we started talking, and everybody I built a truck for, I always ask them, what's your end goal? Like, where do you see this truck being in 4 or 5 years? And, I tell people, well, if it's going to take you an extra few months or an extra year even to save up and build the truck you want first, that way you don't do what, a lot of me and my buddies did back in the day, and you rebuild your truck 3 or 4 times. I mean, the our 1450 F-150, you know, we call it Betsy. She used to look like a cow back in the day, all spotted up and stuff. So that's how she got her nickname. But you know, you end up building things multiple times. I mean, I had a 3.5-inch housing on the rear end when we started racing, and you know, we started having a lot of issues because we only had 2 1/4 hubs on it, and we had a lot of tire deflection, which would push the calipers off of the rotors, and then your brakes wouldn't work that great, and just the bigger tires you would go to. We knew what we eventually wanted in the truck, so we ended up converting to a 4-inch housing in it.
It took us like 9 months.
Yeah, it took us like almost a year to save up everything, to get all the parts, and slowly, you know, save up, get everything. You know, we finally did it, and it's one of those things, you know, kind of buy once, cry once, and sometimes it's better off to save up and get what you want first than just throw money at it, you know. You know, I've you know, spent X amount of numbers on that truck, and you know, a lot of stuff we got used, and you know, you don't always have to buy the best brand new. It all comes down to what you want in a truck. What are you doing with it, you know? I got a lot of buddies that we have a lot of friends that like to do the Mojave Trail, and you know, they build trucks that are perfectly capable of that. So you know, it's not everybody's the same. Not everybody wants to, you know, go down Barstow, Maine at 90 miles an hour, which is fine. You know, just find what you want to do and what you like to do. You know, like we originally, our Betsy was supposed to be a luxury pre-runner. That's what it was
Intended.
That's what it was intended to do, you know, and I always had a dream of racing.
But at the time, we were fortunate enough that we built your truck in 2007. We started the front end, and then 2008, I had my 2004 GMC Sierra, and I liked the look of his truck. I liked the way it handled, so we decided we were going to build my truck too. And we were fortunate enough that we had 2 trucks. So once you decided to build Betsy, then we had my truck going.
Yeah, and once we got her truck going and it was capable, and we did desert trips, we did the Mojave Trail in it, and it was a 2004 GMC Sierra, and had our front long travel kit on it that we actually built together. It cycled about 20 to 21 inches of travel, bumped and strapped. Had swing set steering on it that we built from scratch with a Saginaw steering box, and it was also 4-linked in the rear with it was just a single coilover per coil. About the last year we owned the truck, we put a bypass on the rear just to slow it down a little bit and help with the dampening. But the truck was great. We did Mojave Trail trips, we did Akatia, we did Barstow.
It was a great family pre-runner.
Had AC, you know, it was a great truck.
Getter, daily driver.
Yeah, she daily drove it to college for the whole time she was going to college. So it was a great truck, and why we had that truck, we did a bunch of upgrades on the F-150 on Betsy.
That was when you did the center mount.
Yeah, we did the center mount. So that was the first truck I ever center mounted. That was all built by hand. No CAD design on that truck. It was all built by hand, figured out. Has full swing set steering still. It pulls about 26 inches of travel in the front, about 28, 29 metal to metal, but the shocks are actually the limiting factor on the truck. So we'll do some more episodes on that truck as well once we get her back up and going. Right now she's going through a full prep, but we were supposed to race Rage, but I ended up breaking my thumb out in the desert, so
last week.
so we can't race. But we're gonna go out there and support all our buddies that race and stuff like
Especially
that.
Nick.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
that's a little bit about us and kind of how we started, and just stay tuned for more of our builds. And
if you have any questions, just post in the comments or message us on Instagram. Or
yeah, message us on Instagram, and I'm always willing to help people out. You know, I didn't know anything when I started, and I just asked a bunch of questions, and you know, you'll get a lot of people that are stuck in their ways and don't want to help you, but there's a lot of people out there that will help you.
Yeah, but that's a little about us. So stay tuned for more. Thanks for watching.
See you, everybody.